It's well known that the Vikings want to trade up with New England or Arizona or even Washington, but why would they do it? I'm here to make the pitch. It's Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. My everydayers, sound off in the YouTube comments or on Twitter or whatever. Love hearing from all of my everydayers. If you are a new everydayer, an aspiring everydayer, hello, welcome. My name is Luke. You can, of course, find this show anywhere where you listen to podcasts, whether it is a podcast app like the SiriusXM app, or you can also find hometown broadcasts of any sports team. You could search out like Timberwolves or whatever the team is. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, today on the show, I would like to send out a message to the Arizona Cardinals, the New England Patriots, and the Washington Commanders. Teams that the Vikings could possibly trade up with the NFL draft. We all know that Kwesi wants to trade. I mean, it's very obvious, right? The way that they've approached the offseason, even if he didn't have any quotes or rumors or anything. They got a bridge quarterback and they loaded up 2 first-round picks. They're very clearly trying to trade up. Like, what else could that be for? And by the way, the possibility that they're just going to like stick at 11 and 23 and just like pick. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I will probably do like a mock on that someday, because I know a lot of people do think like want to consider that. So maybe I'll do like a mock draft Monday or something some other time. But anyways, look, we know where this is headed, right? Like we can see it. And at the owners' meetings over the weekend, where all 32 GMs and all 32 head coaches are all in the same place, and then the owners will vote on like rule changes and stuff. But it's kind of this like weird meeting where some conversations can get had, and that means that we can sort of advance the information that we have about the likelihood of Minnesota trading up. And in particular, got this interesting quote. Let's start with the Washington Commanders. You got this interesting quote from Dan Quinn, who said, yes, I would say the phone is ringing, and because, a lot of talent is in the group this year, so I would appreciate fielding these calls as it goes through. And usually it's not necessarily later than number 6 or number 7, but those people who are usually in the top 4 or 5, there's somebody that has targeted. There's somebody that has targeted. And I think it's mostly like, well, got to take a shot. And a lot of times, no, it's thanks for calling. But it's part of the process, and you do have to do your due diligence to listen and make sure. And then he talked about walking past in the hallway when he was with the Cowboys, and that was when they did the Herschel Walker trade. He was in the Cowboys organization then, and a lot of draft picks changed the organization, so blah, 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 right? Like, it's this very, like, hey, we're listening, give us a call kind of quote, isn't it? From Dan Quinn, and saying, yeah, I hope Adam Peters is listening, GM for the Commanders. So Adam Peters, GM for the Commanders, as I'm sure you are listening to this Vikings podcast, I got a message for you. All right. I'm going to make the pitch for why the Washington Commanders should trade from 2 down to 11 and 23, and then some. And honestly, Adam, Dan Quinn kind of made the point. He was with the Cowboys when they Herschel Walkered it. Guess who they made that trade with? It's the Vikings. You could do part 2 here, man. I mean, truly, you'd fleece the heck out of the Vikings. It's no secret that Kwesi is like very okay with being just bled for this, right? Just totally bent over a barrel over it. He's fine with that. He might not even value draft picks that highly in the first place, which is pretty crazy, right? I mean, again, your head coach saw firsthand how a good couple of drafts can completely turn around an organization, and what organization needs that turnaround more than the Washington Commanders, who are finally out from under the thumb of Dan Snyder. It's this whole fresh start. Why not start fresh with a whole bunch of draft capital in the next 2 or 3 years where you can really build the team in the image that you want? The other thing here is, Who are you taking at number 2? If you are going to sit and stubbornly say no to 3 first-round picks, maybe even 4 first-round picks, I wouldn't put it past Kwesi. If you were going to sit and say, no, I'm taking my quarterback instead, who's coming in and thriving under this roster? This is the issue here. And this is where you get with a lot of top 5 picks that are great college quarterbacks that then go into tough situations and they don't work out. You don't even have to look very far. Go look at what's going on with Daniel Jones. Go look at Zach Wilson elsewhere in New York. But looking at the patchwork offensive line that the Commanders have put together, you've got, a tackle playing guard right now in Sam Cosmi. Yeah, you have Tyler Badge. You've got Andrew Wiley and Braden Daniels as tackles. You've got a geriatric Zach Ertz as the outlet tight end. And you do have Terry McLaurin, but it's kind of Terry McLaurin and guys. Jahan Dotson hasn't lived up to that first round expectation. Diami Brown hasn't lived up to that third round expectation necessarily. That's an okay receiver core, but you're going to need a little better than okay. You're going to need a group that doesn't cause its own problems, because if you take, say, Jaden Daniels, who is the most logical fit with Cliff Kingsbury and what you've kind of built in Washington, well, he's an eyedropper, right? I mean, you see it. You can see that when there is trouble, he looks to scramble. And here's the thing about LSU and the way that he's been taught for 5 years of college. So this is a very ingrained habit because of his running ability. They did not do scramble drills. And if you watch Commanders ball over the last couple of years with McLaurin and with Dotson, those guys excelled at the scramble drill, with guys who run around and, find ways to get open, work back toward the quarterback, work deep, work away from your from your coverage. Jaden Daniels isn't used to that. He doesn't have that instinct, and he doesn't have a lot of reps in that scramble drill. When it was a scramble time at LSU, those receivers would block. Do we want Jahan Dotson and Diami Brown becoming downfield blockers or scramble drillers, right? That might not be as good of a fit as you think. And with Drake May, again, a guy that can kind of cause his own problems by drifting out of the pocket, by ruining the ankles. That O-line is going to struggle enough as it is. If you bring Drake May or Jaden Daniels into that organization and stack problems on top of the problems that those receivers already have, you're going to have a really difficult time winning football games out the gate. And that's going to not only possibly stunt the development of these quarterbacks and lead to a bust situation, which means you, Mr. Adam Peters, lose your job, but also it's going to make it that much slower of a process to turn the Commanders into a team you can be proud of. And that rookie contract benefit, that is a limited window. 1, 2, 3 years. You give it 3 cheap years, because year 4 of the second overall pick is actually fairly expensive. And year 5 is the 5th-year option, which for quarterbacks is going to be basically market rate. So you get 3 years, and you might have to waste 1 or 2 of them just trying to get your feet under you. Why don't you get your feet under you first and then do the rookie quarterback thing, right? And if you take this deal from the Vikings, you've got 2 first-round picks this year. You can grab your favorite tackle. They'll be there. There's going to be a huge run on receivers. Of course, there's going to be this run on quarterbacks, and you can still get a decent quarterback in the building to begin with, because you'll have pick 23, where you can get Penix or Nix, whoever you like there, and you don't have to rely on those guys to become the dude. I mean, hey, maybe there's a chance that they do, and maybe you should probably still take that swing just because the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is big enough to make the risk worth it. But even if you wait till the second round and take somebody like Bo Nix, right, then the pressure's off of you a little bit. And it spurs on a little bit of patience for an organization that has desperately needed patience since the 90s. They have needed the patience that you can inspire here by just taking a little bit of a slower approach and not being so pressured to strike while the iron is hot just because you happen to have the second overall pick at a time when you're not really ready to create that Super Bowl window that the rookie QB contract tends to inspire. I don't know if this is right for you, Washington. Here's the thing. You have the second overall pick. There are so many ways that this can go that get you, Adam Peters, fired. One of those ways will never happen if you trade down and build up and apply a little bit of patience. So let us be your outlet for that. Let us be your path out of this incredibly difficult decision between Drake May and Jaden Daniels and the fact that both of them might be a total mess for you. This is a trap. It looks really, really clean on the outside. It looks like this lovely opportunity to get QB of the future and aspire Washington to the promised land. For you, it's a trap. So either let us fall into that trap, or, Minnesota just has a better supporting cast and we're a little bit more ready than you, and we're willing to pay up to make up the difference in draft order. Go take this really, really, really good deal, build an awesome team, get praised like Howie Roseman gets praised for building awesome rosters and having a contender every single year, and you'll have other chances at quarterback. You will. It's going to be okay. Now, the rub here is that there are other teams that we're going to call, all right, Adam Peters? We're going to call New England. We're going to call Arizona, maybe even the Chargers or Giants. But in terms of those first two teams, next up, I'm going to tell you what my pitch is for Elliott Wolf and for Monty Ossenfort. Today's increasingly strange episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. And it sure is bracket season, and the Grambling is on fire. This is a wonderful time in the world of sports. We've got free agency stuff, we've got draft rumors, and we've got March Madness, baby. If your bracket's done and over with, and I know that has happened to some of you, you can go to FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and get your Gramble on. New customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's $200 to use on sports point spreads, money lines, even the champion, draft props, whatever you want. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and place a $5 bet on whatever you want. It can be a South Carolina women's basketball money line, which is going to be like minus 70 million or something because that team is insane. And assuming that they do win, you will get $200 back in bonus bets. You can just bet 40-1 on the South Carolina Gamecocks. You're never going to find anything like that anywhere else. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Thanks a bunch for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. And when you are done with this weird one, you can go to find something more normal at Locked On Minnesota Sports. You can listen about the Wild, the Wolves, the Twins, the Gophers, hanging out in the NIT, and everything else going on in the world of Minnesota sports. 24/7 streaming channel. Go check it out. Now, we got to talk Elliott Wolf, New England Patriots. Look, there have been on and off rumors since the Senior Bowl about the Vikings trying to move up with number 3, from Darren Wolfson saying at the Senior Bowl that just reporting that the Vikings broached the topic, but not really reporting anything about how that went, to the Combine. Albert Breer had conversations with people around Atlanta who basically said, yeah, we tried to trade up and that was a no-go, so now we're really interested in Kirk Cousins, and that article was more about that. To kind of on and off stuff now from the New England beat about their various levels of interest in if it were 2 first-round picks or 3 first-round picks, or what the trade would possibly be to get up to pick number 3 and take what would ostensibly be Drake May, but could be Jaden Daniels. It would depend on what Washington does, assuming that my very impassioned plea fell on deaf ears, which would be very rude of them. So, assuming that the Commanders are rude, which historically is a decent assumption, the next move would be to call up Elliott Wolf. So, Elliott, again, I'm assuming that you're listening because, of course you are. This is Locked On Vikings. Why wouldn't Elliott Wolf be listening to Locked On Vikings? Here's the thing. You don't really get as much choice as you think you get here, right? By all accounts, this is a 3 quarterback draft in the top three picks, right? There's Caleb Williams, there's Drake May, there's Jaden Daniels. Yes, JJ McCarthy exists, and I'm sure there are a lot of people around that think JJ McCarthy is QB2 or QB3. Like, of course, right? Every draft take exists. It wouldn't be surprising, but it's certainly not the majority opinion, and it doesn't sound like that's where any teams are going to go. So you, of the three guys, it kind of doesn't matter which guy you like the most. You're getting stuck with whichever one the Commanders didn't want. So you better hope that Adam Peters up there is wrong. And that's a new GM, right? This is a new look Washington Commanders. You cannot just sort of like short them the way you used to be able to short the Commanders. You kind of got to hope that they're wrong and that you get the guy, right? Or that all three of these guys are great. And honestly, how often do QBs go 1, 2, 3 at all, and let alone how often do they go and work out? The only two times I can think of were a couple of years ago when one of those guys was Trey Lance, which you would have been stuck with, or go back to like 1999 when it was Akili Smith, which also would be the one that you're stuck with here. You don't want this as bad as you think you do, right? And I know quarterback's the most important position out there, and a chance to get your guy of the future, it's everything. I'm totally sympathetic to that. That's why we're going to be able to offer you, at the very least, 3 first-round picks. So you can go ahead and hang up on Las Vegas or Denver. None of them can do the thing with 11 and 23 and a 2025 first-round pick to get up to pick number 3. But I got to say, I was just looking at this for the Commanders. It doesn't make sense what they're doing here, but it kind of doesn't make sense for what you're doing here either. To nurture a guy like Drake May, who needs a good offensive line, somebody who can, and who needs a improvisational wide receiver core, which you've got. Hey, look, love that you got KJ Osborne. All right. He can absolutely clutch up for you on key third downs and stuff, but Kendrick Bourne, I mean, Jalen Reagor, Juju Smith-Schuster, these are not the names of a wide receiver core that's going to be able to bail somebody out and, find that their quarterback is in a rough situation and go be the playmaker that they need at the right time. I love KJ Osborne, but that's not his game. And that is not even to start on this offensive line. I mean, you have... You got Michael Quinn, who's going to play right tackle. He's maybe not even a right tackle. You have City Sow. You've got a second year fourth rounder at right guard. You've got problems up front on that offensive line. And look, Drake May's response to pressure is to go into chaos hero ball mode. And that might be kind of the draw of Drake May, right? But I think we all can agree that with Drake May, you have to get him under control. That's the goal of him, of getting him from college ball to the pros, is to get him a little bit like chilled out and under control so that a bad situation doesn't turn into a worse situation. That's don't turn an L into a catastrophe, right? And that kind of feels like what might happen with Drake May if you put him behind this offensive line and give him these weapons to throw to. Bottom line is, New England Patriots, you are not ready for nurturing a quarterback. And you don't need to look far to see what could happen if you try to put a raw but exciting and talented quarterback onto a team that is not ready for him. You don't even need to look outside this phone call because that guy just got signed for $10 million to the Minnesota Vikings, and you got a front row seat to his crash and burn in New York. Now he's playing bridge quarterback for us, right? This guy should have been the franchise QB, by the way, picked 3rd overall. So pedigree-wise, right, we're dealing with the same amount of talent, ostensibly, and I actually think that that's fair to say about Sam Darnold as a prospect. He was and is a very talented guy, but he was raw, and he had issues in vision. He had issues with, turnovers rattling him, and then suddenly, I'm pretty sure this was a game against the Patriots, he was seeing ghosts. Right? That was the infamous quote that sort of is the thing that everybody thinks of when they think of Sam Darnold. Well, that is because there was pressure on him all the time. And so that tendency to see ghosts was exacerbated. The word I've been using, it metastasized, right? Even in our own division, we have the same thing that happened with Justin Fields, who just got dumped for a 6th-round pick into Pittsburgh to go be a backup because he had a poor response to pressure, and then they put him under a bunch of pressure. You have to fix that response to pressure. You need to give him a place to give him the time to figure out a better way to like drill his pressure habits. You need to build those habits in a quiet and controlled environment. You can't just throw him into a hail of bullets and say, good luck dancing. That's never going to work out. You need to build those habits. And yeah, you could run through a season with Jacoby Brissett, but I don't think a season's enough for you, New England. I think this team is 2 years away from being ready to accept rookie talent. So take your 2 years. Take your 2 first-round picks in each of those years, as you'll have 11 and 23 this year. And next year, you'll have your own first-round pick and the Vikings' first-round pick, which, by the way, as a rookie quarterback team in a division that they are currently favored to be last in, that's probably going to be a pretty high pick anyways. So you'll be able to stack up some of that talent and get your team to a more reasonable spot. Yeah, you'll be bridging it up with Jacoby Brissett for a minute. That's okay, right? I mean, look at the way the Colts did. The Colts did that for 5 years, and then they ended up on Anthony Richardson because they picked their spot and they had their team ready to do it when they did it. So take your time, Elliott Wolf. You don't need to be in a huge rush. And in fact, Elliott, you were in Green Bay when they did this with Aaron Rodgers. 3 years he sat, right? And he was not nearly ready right away. If Aaron Rodgers had gone in right away, he would have been totally ruined. Everybody agrees on that, but you had Brett Favre in the meantime. Don't put a new quarterback into a situation that's going to wreck him. That's how you get fired, Elliott Wolf, and you don't want to follow up the legacy of Bill Belichick by crashing and burning on a talented quarterback, just like those guys over there in New York did. So let's say that the New England Patriots also say no. I don't know how they can say no to a pitch like that. I mean, come on, that was as persuasive as it gets. But let's say we go 1, 2, 3, and the Vikings are still trying to trade up with the Cardinals. Let's talk to the Cardinals and Monty Ossenfort a little bit. I've got a couple of things to say to them, but also a pitch. Monty. You spurned me last time, all right, Monty? Last year, we were trying to get up, all right? We were trying to go up to 3. You had the 3rd overall pick. You could have taken an insane package from the Minnesota Vikings, including firsts and second-round picks in 2024 and 2025, or at least that's what was rumored at the time, but I'm going to take that as headcanon as true. You could have had the Vikings whole draft for 2023 and the next 2 years. Well, I'm here to say you can have your cake and eat it too. You took that Texans deal, whatever. I get it. We forgive, we forget, we move on. If you still want the Vikings first and second round picks in 2024 and 2025, you can have them. I mean, look, the Texans have our second round picks now, but we have what they are equivalent to, which is that extra first round pick. You could have 3 first round picks if you were willing to give us something back. But here's the rub. This is not Anthony Richardson. Now we're going up for JJ McCarthy. And that's QB4, right? That's not necessarily the prospect that Anthony Richardson is. So the offer that I'm extending to you, if you heard about the offer that was extended to Washington and New England and they said no to it, it's not going to be the same, okay? You got to understand that, it's different for Drake May or for Jaden Daniels than it is for JJ McCarthy. But we still really want JJ McCarthy. We still really like JJ McCarthy. Maybe not 3 first-round picks worth, but we still really like him. And here's what I don't understand, Arizona. Why are you so dead set on Marvin Harrison Jr.? This is something that, by the way, I went on Locked On Cardinals and talked to Alex Clancy about this, and apparently they're like super dead set on him. And a lot of people in Arizona want like Larry Fitzgerald part 2, I think. But look, you don't need to be dead set on Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a phenomenal wide receiver class. If you don't get the best guy in it, who, by the way, I mean, how often is the, agreed upon consensus best guy actually turn into the best guy from the class? I mean, just look at what we got going on here on this Minnesota roster. Who was the best receiver from the 2020 class? Jerry Jeudy went first. A lot of people said it would be CeeDee Lamb, which at least that was closer. Some people said it would be Henry Ruggs. Not so much, but it's Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, who went 5th in that class, went after Jalen Reagor. who's very clearly seen to be in that second tier. Well, this is actually kind of a similar class with Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors as those top 3 receivers. And you got guys like Brian Thomas and Adonai Mitchell and Lad McConkey. These are good players that you can get, not even with 11, you could get some of those guys with 23. I mean, that's wide receivers 5 and 6 coming off the board, right? Eventually other positions are going to start to go. And I get it, you want to have that like superstar power and everything, but there are superstars available in all parts of the first round, and even in day 2. So stock up because your roster needs a lot of help. You've got your quarterback situation squared away, and good on you. But can we talk about this pass rush? You've got Justin Jones and Kyrie Tonga and Bilal. You got a bunch of guys that didn't make the Bears, and then like Zaven Collins. This is not good enough. That pass rush needs some serious help. May I introduce you to Chop Robinson, who will be available in this bottom part of the second round, which is honestly beyond me, but it sounds like that is going to be what happens because of other edge rushers like Dallas Turner and that are more exciting to the league. You're going to get some studs. You can walk away from this with Marvin Harrison, or you can walk away from this with Brian Thomas and Chop Robinson. Help your offense and your defense and start to rebuild that really cool core that you had just a couple years ago that was taking the league by storm and at a certain point in the 2021 season was favored to win the NFC. You got to recapture that glory. And yeah, the coaching got in the way. You fixed that problem, but the roster has completely atrophied in that time. And I know you, Monty. I know you want to trade. I know you love to trade down and diversify those picks and get a whole bunch more players. Important picks, right? Important players. You can get maybe a third rounder next year as well. So let that be the offer, Arizona. 11, 23, and a third rounder next year for the 4th overall pick. You are losing out on the difference between wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 5, maybe, in the class. And we have seen plenty of examples where wide receiver 5 isn't even worse. So you're not even guaranteed to be getting a worse player plus a whole other starter at a key position. And you don't need to do chop. You don't need to do edge if you don't. You can do whatever you want with that pick. But it will be another key starter at another position. And you get some other stuff next time. This is what you guys need. And to be frank, you owe it to us because you screwed us on the Anthony Richardson thing. And you screwed yourselves on the Anthony Richardson thing. You could have had extra first-round picks this year and extra picks next year. Well, guess what? You can still have them if you just set the Minnesota Vikings up with their quarterback. There have been a bunch of rumors about the Cardinals going back and forth again. Like Marvin Harrison is the name linked to them. It's the name you'll see in every single mock draft. But the trade down situation is sort of hard to make heads or tails of. But if all 3 of those say no, and we have to make a very similar appeal to the Chargers, that doesn't sound like it's going to be nearly as hard of a sell. And it sounds like trading up to 5 is the fallback, I guess, plan. Again, there is, of course, the plan where, oh my God, nobody wanted to do it. Everybody hung up the phone on you and you didn't get any picks done. You just pick at 11 and 23. I mean, that's a 2 first-round picks here. You would hope you get some good players there, and that's maybe worth talking about another time. But here's what we're going to do now. All right, we are going to put a lid on this and talk more about trade-ups when and if something happens. Here's the rub. Because the owners' meeting was now, this is when maybe some talks got a little bit further. Or talks could have fallen through entirely. And there's not really a way that you or I would know about that. We wouldn't even really see it in the reports because everybody's trying to negotiate through the media. And it's hard to make heads or tails of that. But if this week goes by and we don't hear anything, we don't see a trade, then it's probably unlikely to happen until the actual day. And big trades like that on the actual day can be pretty hard to execute. So I would say it gets a little harder. But not impossible by any means. And it also could be done but not finalized. So we still wouldn't really know. But if it's going to happen pre-draft, I would guess that it happens this week, early this week, maybe even. As now all of these people are in the same room, this is their chance to really sit down, look each other in the eyes, and negotiate it. If not, I think you can probably stop F5ing on your Twitter feeds until the actual draft happens. So if it goes down, if we see a huge trade, we'll of course talk about it here. Otherwise, tomorrow is Twitter Tuesday, so get your questions and you can of course send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. You can send me a question if you have something longer in the Google form in the show notes or the YouTube description, whatever you're watching this on. You can also, of course, send it to me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL, and I usually put out a call sometime on Monday mornings. So you should be able to see it there and respond to that. You can DM it to me if you want. That is fine, but I can't guarantee that I won't forget about it. So use the Google form that I only check right before I record, so I'll definitely get it. I will see you guys all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.